From today, your milk costs more. From today, your gold costs more. From today, the rupee in your pocket buys less than it did yesterday. A war that started 3,000 kilometers away in February has spent 3 months quietly marching toward your home. Today, it knocked on your kitchen door. And it is not leaving anytime soon. Welcome to BharatLens. 3 things happened in India in the last 48 hours that every single household needs to understand. First, Amul and Mother Dairy both hiked milk prices by 2 rupees per litre, effective May 14th. Second, the government emergency hiked gold and silver import duties from 6% to 15% overnight, sending gold prices jumping 6% in a single session to 1,63,000 rupees per 10 grams. And third, the rupee hit a record low of 95.73 to the dollar, the weakest the rupee has ever been in history. These 3 events are not separate stories. They are one story. The story of what happens when a war in West Asia finally stops being a headline and starts being your grocery bill. Today on BharatLens, we connect every dot. Let us start with milk. Because nothing hits home harder than the price of milk. Amul, the Gujarat Cooperative Milk Marketing Federation, announced a 2 rupee per litre hike across all its major variants. Amul Gold, Amul Taza, Amul Shakti, cow milk, all up. Mother Dairy followed immediately with the same 2 rupee hike across Delhi NCR. For a 500 milliliters pouch, the increase is 1 rupee. This is the second Amul price hike in 12 months. Now Amul's official statement cited 3 reasons: rising cattle feed costs, higher packaging film costs, and increased fuel expenses. Every single one of those 3 reasons connects directly to the Iran war. Cattle feed contains soybean meal, maize derivatives, and other commodities whose global prices have been volatile since the Strait of Hormuz disruption began. Packaging film is a petroleum derivative. It is made from plastic resins that are priced off crude oil. And fuel, diesel for refrigerated milk trucks, LPG for dairy processing plants, has become dramatically more expensive to source and supply since February. So when you pour that extra priced glass of milk tomorrow morning, know exactly what you are paying for. You are paying for a blockade in a strait you cannot find on a map. You are paying for oil tankers that cannot pass. You are paying for a war India did not start and cannot stop. The broader context matters here. Food inflation in India crossed 4% in April. The Iran war began in late February. That is a 10-week transmission, from a military strike on a country 3,000 kilometers away to the price of milk in your refrigerator. That is how interconnected the modern global economy is. And that 10-week lag is now over. The price transmission is happening in real time. Now let us talk about gold. Because this one is more dramatic, and more consequential. On the evening of May 13th, the government issued emergency notifications raising import duties on gold and silver from 6% to 15%. Not gradually. Not with advance warning. Overnight. The decision combines a 10% basic customs duty with a 5% agriculture infrastructure and development cess. This is the single biggest one-day jump in gold import duties in India's recent history. The immediate market impact was brutal. Gold prices in India surged 6% in a single session, hitting 1,63,000 rupees per 10 grams. Silver crossed 3 lakh rupees per kilogram intraday for the first time in history. MCX gold hit an intraday high of 1,64,497 rupees. These are numbers that no Indian jeweler, no wedding planner, no investor in gold has ever seen before. Why did the government do this? The answer requires understanding what has been happening to India's gold imports. India is the world's second largest gold consumer. In the first 2 months of 2026, monthly gold imports averaged 83 tons, up sharply from an average of 53 tons per month across all of 2025. As the Iran war drove global uncertainty, as the rupee weakened, as investors looked for safe haven assets, Indians rushed to buy gold. And every ton of gold imported is dollars leaving India. Dollars that India desperately needs to pay for oil. The government's logic is straightforward. India cannot afford to burn foreign exchange on gold imports when it is already burning through reserves to pay for elevated oil prices. Forex reserves have fallen from $728 billion in February to $690 billion in early May, a drop of nearly $38 billion in 10 weeks. The gold duty hike is a tourniquet. The government is trying to stop the bleeding. But here is the complication that every industry expert is flagging. At 15% duty, the price gap between official and unofficial gold, smuggled gold, becomes wide enough to make criminal arbitrage extremely profitable. A Mumbai-based bullion dealer has already warned publicly that grey markets are likely to become active, with the incentives to bring in gold illegally now very high. India has a long history of gold smuggling. The duty hike of the 1990s created entire smuggling networks. The government is aware of this risk. Whether it has a plan to manage it is the open question. Modi's appeal last week to avoid buying gold for a year now looks like exactly what it was: advanced preparation. The Prime Minister was softening public opinion before the government acted. The duty hike was always coming. The appeal was the warning shot. Now let us talk about something less visible but more dangerous than milk prices or gold duties. The rupee. The Indian rupee hit 95.73 to the dollar on May 13th, a record low. For context, the rupee was trading at around 84 to the dollar in early 2025. It has lost approximately 5% of its value since late February, since the Iran war began. That 5% depreciation sounds small. It is not. Every imported product that India buys, oil, gold, electronic components, fertilizers, edible oil, machinery, is priced in dollars. When the rupee weakens, all of those imports cost more in rupee terms. A $10 barrel of oil that cost 840 rupees at 84 to the dollar now costs 957 rupees at 95.73. That difference, spread across the hundreds of millions of barrels India imports, adds up to trillions of rupees of additional cost that gets absorbed somewhere. By the government. By oil companies. By consumers. Eventually, always by consumers. The rupee weakness is also a signal of capital flight. When global investors sense economic stress in a country, rising import bills, widening current account deficit, reserve depletion, they pull money out. That outflow puts further pressure on the currency, which puts further pressure on import costs, which puts further pressure on inflation, which puts further pressure on the economy. This is the spiral that India's policymakers are trying to break. The Reserve Bank of India has been intervening in currency markets, selling dollars from reserves to support the rupee. That intervention is what has prevented the rupee from falling even further. But every dollar the RBI sells to defend the rupee is a dollar fewer in India's forex reserves. The reserves falling from $728 billion to $690 billion is largely explained by this intervention. India is spending its war chest to protect the currency. And the war, the Iran war, shows no sign of ending. Let us zoom out. Because the milk, the gold, and the rupee are symptoms. The disease is the structural exposure of India's economy to a single strategic choke point, the Strait of Hormuz. India imports 85% of its oil. 50% of that oil passes through the Strait of Hormuz. 91% of India's LPG passes through the Gulf. Over 60% of India's LNG comes from the same region. India is, in energy terms, a country that is almost entirely dependent on a strip of water 33 kilometers wide, currently in the middle of a war zone. The Iran war has been characterized by the International Energy Agency as the largest supply disruption in the history of the global oil market. Larger than the 1973 Arab oil embargo. Larger than the Gulf War disruptions of 1990. Larger than the post-COVID energy shock. India is living through the biggest energy supply crisis in history, and the government has, so far, managed it better than most. Fuel prices at the pump have not been raised. LPG for households has been held. But the cost of that restraint is visible everywhere else, in reserves, in the rupee, in the current account deficit, and now in milk prices and gold duties. What Uday Kotak warned about just days ago, that the shock is coming and it is coming big, is already beginning to arrive. Not all at once. Not dramatically. But incrementally, item by item, price by price. Milk today. Vegetables tomorrow as transportation costs rise. Electricity bills as fuel costs transmit into power generation. School stationery as plastic and packaging costs rise. Every corner of the Indian consumption basket is connected to energy prices. And energy prices are connected to a war. The government has used up most of its easy options. Keeping fuel prices stable has cost the oil companies and the treasury billions. The gold duty hike is already done. The RBI is defending the rupee but cannot do so indefinitely. What comes next depends on one thing above all others: how long the Iran war continues. If a ceasefire is reached in the next few weeks, and there is diplomatic activity happening, oil prices could fall sharply. The rupee could recover. The pressure on India's economy would ease. The gold duty might be reversed once the forex pressure reduces. If the war drags through the summer, through June, July, August, the pressure compounds. Monsoon season brings its own disruptions. The current account deficit widens further. The government will face harder choices about whether to finally raise fuel prices at the pump, a decision it has so far refused to make but cannot defer forever. For ordinary Indians, the practical message is simple. The era of cheap milk, cheap fuel, and easily accessible gold, at the prices you have been used to, is paused. Not permanently. But for as long as this war continues. Modi's 7 appeals last week were not political theater. They were a genuine call to reduce consumption of imported goods at a moment when every rupee of foreign exchange matters. The milk hike and the gold duty are the government's own contribution to the same adjustment, making imports more expensive to reduce the pressure on India's currency and reserves. A war began in February in a country most Indians could not find on a map 3 months ago. Today, that war is in your morning tea. It is in your wife's jewelry box. It is in the value of the cash in your wallet. The Iran war has stopped being a geopolitical story and become a kitchen table story. India is managing this better than most countries. Bangladesh is in recession. Pakistan is in energy collapse. Several Southeast Asian nations have declared states of emergency. India, with stronger reserves, better policymaking, and a more diversified economy, is absorbing the shock. But absorbing is not the same as being unaffected. Here is what I want you to take away from today's video. Every price hike you see in the coming weeks, milk, vegetables, cooking gas, electricity, air tickets, trace it back. It leads to one place: the Strait of Hormuz. And the strait will only reopen when the war ends. Until then, the adjustment has just begun. Tell me in the comments, how is the Iran war affecting your household budget right now? And if BharatLens is giving you the real picture behind every price rise, you know what to do.